Okay, we are live. What I thought I would share with you today, excuse me, what I thought I would share with you today is some of the conversations, without getting into specifics on, situations in terms of the conversations that I have with people. But I sent out an email to, probably 500 to 1,000 people. I'm not going to give the exact number, but it was a large subset. And I asked essentially what were some of the biggest challenges that they were facing as it relates to investing in commercial real estate. And what I noticed were the same common problems that were coming up. I'm not sure if there's a big delay on this or not. Hopefully it's recording okay. But, Shane, how do I structure my deal? How do I raise capital? Where do I find investors? How do I raise $1 million, 500,000, $2 million for my next deal? I mean, these were all, very common challenges that investors new to commercial real estate came up with. And I'll give you one kind of specific example as it relates to structuring your deals, right? I mean, I literally lay out exactly how I structure my deals with some nuances, obviously, right? Because, depending on the risk in the deal and how much experience you have, you might have to give up a little bit more, or you may be able to get a little bit more depending on your reputation and who you're going to. But in my book, Club Syndication, I talk about I do a GPLP. Here are the preferred returns that I do. Here's roughly the splits, whether it's 70-30, 75-25. I mean, there's no hard and fast rule on how to do this. And obviously, you want to talk to your securities lawyer and really make sure that you've got it properly documented. But I even talk about the fees that I charge, right? Whether it's an acquisition fee, project management fee. And so um, it was kind of surprising because I thought, well, maybe I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it. But what I started to after I had these calls and I kind of went away and I thought to myself, okay, like how can I really make sure someone new to commercial real estate gets the help that they need? And what I came up with was a few things. Number one, if you've never done a commercial deal, if you've never raised capital for it, if you've never closed on one, I think what happens is, and I felt the same way. You're fearful of making a mistake. And so you want to know every specific thing in a deal. And I'll just be very candid. That will keep you in analysis by paralysis because you will never know everything. Even to this day, deals I do, I'm still learning. I'm still figuring things out. I'm going to tell you how I do that um, because it's we'll get into number two. So the first one is fear of making a mistake, which is very legitimate because obviously in commercial real estate, the stakes are much bigger and you don't want to make a mistake. The second, and I think this is really where it gets down to the essence of what I discovered on these calls is if you've never done it, it's hard to anticipate the next step. Now, let me give you an analogy, and this is kind of where I came up with this concept. I was watching my son play soccer on Saturday, and it was really funny because he's 5, and basically all the kids kind of group together and they chase the ball around, right? And every once in a while, one of the kids will kick it loose, and then they all chase after it again. And I thought it was, and I started watching, and then towards about halfway through the game, I started to notice that Easton was actually when the other team got the ball and there, the big, mob of kids is chasing it, he would run directly back to his net because he knew that if the other team had the ball, they would want to score on him. And so I was like, okay, so he is now anticipating where the ball is going to go, but he's overcompensating, right? He didn't need to run all the way back because frequently he would be running, the ball would come out, and all he had to do was turn around and he could kick it. But at least he was getting the right mindset of where is the ball going? I'm going to go there because that way, at least, in his mind, he could save a goal. He was very defensive oriented. I didn't teach him that, even though I played defense in hockey and I was a midfielder in soccer when I played. But this is, I think, a very good analogy on when I talk to new commercial real estate investors. If they haven't done it, they don't know how to anticipate. So the question then becomes, well, how do you anticipate what can come up in a deal? I remember when I first started getting into commercial real estate, my mentors, we would, I would listen to them on the phone on a negotiation or kind of like high stakes, stressful situations. And I was thinking, like, how are they able to remain so calm and collected? And they were able to maneuver and deal with things that were coming at them. And I would talk to them, right? Andy and Dave and Jason and all the, Jim, all the people that I've worked with. And I would sit in on these conversations. And what I started to realize is, first of all, they had had many conversations. So usually it wasn't a surprise. So that was kind of number one. Number two, they role played. And when they put me in those situations, specifically, Andy and I would role play for 30 minutes to an hour. We would go through, okay, you be this person, you be the seller, I'll be the buyer, or you be the person, the investor, and I'll be, raising capital. And essentially, what that would do is, I think what happens is, in our heads, we think about what we want to say to someone, but when it actually comes down to verbalizing it, it comes out very different. And I notice this with my clients when they go to raise capital or when they're negotiating a deal or when they're just describing what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Usually the first time that it comes out, it's not very coherent, it's very hard to follow, and that's okay because it's the first time that they're essentially articulating what it is that their business plan is, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And but if you do it in a safe environment and you do it like, obviously when I'm role playing, I don't have the seller on the other side, right? We can work through this. What are the objections? And then I can hear how someone that has 20, 30 years experience would handle that situation. And then I can say, you know what? I don't think that would work for me. Or yes, actually, I never even thought of that. That's a great way to potentially, work through that. And if you look at any hockey, any athlete for that matter, right? Like we'll use that as the next kind of metaphor or analogy. They practice. They practice a ton. They will watch game film. Then they will go back and they'll actually run plays because that to them is role playing. And I think when I talk to someone that is, say, stuck in how do I go from residential to commercial, they're trying to do it on their own, watching a YouTube video, listening to, podcasts, reading books, all that's fine. But it's not the real world, right? The real world is when you actually get in touch with a broker, a seller, when you meet face to face with someone that you're trying to ask to put money into your deal. All of a sudden, you find out whether or not that preparation, that podcast, that YouTube video was helpful. But I would say in almost all cases, it's like trying to teach a kid how to swim from YouTube videos, right? The first time you throw them in the water, you find out very quickly that that is not what they need, right? That might be helpful to give them some context, but you almost need to be in the pool with them. I know because I've taught my kids how to swim or hired people to help them swim or riding a bike or whatever it happens to be, right? Like you actually have to physically do it. And so, in my experience, much better to experience those situations in a safe environment, right? So, uh, where and how can you potentially do this? So, um, I'm just going to go through my notes here to make sure that I'm staying on track. The first is when my son was playing hockey or soccer. Sorry, I'm just looking at an email and I've got to jump here in a couple of seconds. When my son was playing, he was getting direct feedback, right? So essentially, he knew that if he ran back to the net and he was able to stop the ball, then he was able to, like it was working. And if it wasn't working, then he needed to change it, right? And the good thing is because he's so competitive, he was able to figure that out very quickly. In commercial real estate, what I would say is before you actually sit down with an investor or before you actually try to raise or buy your first deal, map out and then sit down and role play with someone, hopefully someone that has experience, so that you can practice it, right? at a minimum, you could practice it with your spouse or a good friend where they can give you some feedback and say, you know what, I don't really understand what it is that you're trying to get to, right? And then you can go back and you can start to rework it, and then you can role play it a few more times. I just think it is so valuable to do this because if you're trying to figure it out on your own, uh, the stakes in commercial real estate are too high. And some people will practice and they'll go into the real world and they'll practice this on brokers and investors, and that's fine. The challenge with that, unfortunately, is this: number one, the pool of prospective commercial real estate sellers and brokers is small, and so it's very easy to burn through most of them in your market. And if you get the reputation as someone that is not credible, it's very hard to bounce back from that. So, hence why I'm saying practice this in a safe environment, practice this with someone, hopefully, that has experience and can give you kind of feedback. And, one of the things I took away from listening to interview with Ed Milet and Coach Dabo, who's, I think he's with Clemson Tide. The coach says 97% of their success was based on preparation, doing small things well. And when you're raising money, investing in commercial real estate, going out to secure debt, I mean, it's all these little things that make a huge impact on your ability to be successful. Okay. And so I'm just going to leave you with a couple of things. Take the time, map out what is your business plan, what is your exit, how are you going to fix the property, how are you going to raise the capital, right? A few of the questions: how much money goes into the deal, when does it go into the deal, how much money comes out of the deal, when does it come out of the deal. Put all that together, practice it with someone, and then once you feel comfortable and it's coming out in a very fluid, concise manner, right? One of the reasons I do these podcasts is because it helps me to articulate in a much more um, you know streamlined fashion on my investing philosophy. And it helps me then raise capital, talk to investors, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's really what I got. I got to jump. Um, Hopefully, this was helpful. And like I said, try to find a place where you can practice, where you can role play, and there's avenues out there. Obviously, the coaching program that I have is one area. It's not the only place. If you can find someone else that is in the world of commercial real estate that will give you some constructive criticism and feedback, not to hurt your feelings, but to give you sincere help, then that's obviously an option too. That's it. Have a great day. Bye for now.